All right, ready for a deep dive. Today, we're tackling Confucius.
Really diving in beyond the fortune cookie stuff. This is about the real Confucius.
Exactly, and getting to the core of his philosophy, his impact. I mean, talk about a legacy over 2,000 years.
It's incredible and still so relevant today. But most people, they know of him.
Right, just those famous sayings.
Exactly. But the actual story, that's where it gets really fascinating. For example, did you know there's actually a debate
Oh, tell me.
about whether Confucius even wrote any of the texts we attribute to him?
Whoa, seriously. That's a big one. We'll definitely have to circle back to that.
We will, but first, let's set the stage a little. We're talking ancient China, 6th century BCE. Think major political upheaval.
Okay, like Game of Thrones level.
Pretty much. Different kingdoms constantly fighting for power.
So not exactly the peaceful harmony Confucius is known for.
Not quite, but that's the world he was born into. His given name, by the way, was Kong Ku. Later became Master Kong.
And we know him as Confucius. It's a westernized version.
Exactly, Confuzi Latinized. Even his name tells a story, how his ideas traveled through time.
Fascinating. But back to his early life, not exactly born with a silver spoon, right?
No, not at all. His father, a military officer, died when Confucius was really young.
And his mother.
She was devoted to his education, even though they were living in poverty.
You can already see how those early experiences shaped him.
Absolutely. Despite their struggles, education was paramount. That value definitely instilled in him from a young age. And, it shows you how someone's background.
It influences everything.
It does. Now, as Confucius got older, he went into government, held a few positions.
Aiming to create that ideal society.
He really believed in the power of good governance, that it could truly change people's lives for the better.
But the reality of politics, it's messy.
It is. And he faced huge challenges. Eventually, he was driven into exile. Can you imagine?
Exile, forced to leave your homeland because your ideas were too radical.
Wow. It shows you how different things were then. But there's this fascinating story about a rebellion. Shows you Confucius's political savvy.
Okay, a rebellion story. Let's hear it. Which one was this?
The rebellion at Bai. Not just some small uprising. Powerful families were involved, challenging the ruler.
High stakes.
Absolutely. And Confucius, he was right in the thick of it. But instead of resorting to violence, you know what he did.
What? I'm on the edge of my seat.
He used his understanding of social rituals, obligations.
He outsmarted them.
He did. A victory of strategy, diplomacy over brute force.
Brains over brawn. I like it.
But sadly, not every conflict could be solved that way. Exile meant years of wandering different states.
Years. Wow. Just traveling all that time, still believing you have something to offer the world.
It really speaks to his character. Some rulers were intrigued by his ideas.
But putting them into practice, totally different story.
Exactly. So he eventually returned to his home state, never achieved the political success he might have wanted.
But sometimes it's like that, right? What we accomplish in our lifetime
It's not the whole picture.
makes you think. It really does make you think about the long game. But let's dive into what he actually believed, his philosophy. And I gotta say, it's way more than just those fortune cookie sayings.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in the one-liners, but there's real depth there.
Exactly. We've all heard, do not do unto others. But what's the deeper meaning there? What's the core of Confucianism?
It all comes down to personal morality. Confucius believed that's where it starts with the individual.
So if we cultivate ourselves, our character,
Then that ripples outwards. It impacts society as a whole. It creates harmony, justice. He wasn't just talking about lofty ideals either.
so it's not just about following rules.
It's deeper than that. It's about becoming a certain kind of person. He talked about lie, often translated as ritual.
Okay, I've heard that, but it always seemed kind of vague.
It's much bigger than just rituals. Think of it as any action that contributes to the ideal society. From everyday etiquette to those big ceremonies, it's about understanding your place, your role.
And acting accordingly.
Exactly. And you know what? It feels incredibly relevant today. I mean, think about how we interact online.
It's like leaf for the digital age.
Exactly. Every click, every post, it's contributing to the online world we're creating. But Li is just one part. There's also yi righteousness.
Okay, righteousness. That one's tough. Doing what's right, even when it's hard.
Especially when it's hard, even when it's not in your own best interest.
Yeah, anyone can talk about doing the right thing, but
But living it, that's the test. Confucius, though, He believed that yi was crucial for a just society.
It's the foundation.
And it really defines a person,
Hmm.
shows you their true character, makes you think about all the choices we face, right? Where the ethical path isn't always clear cut.
So many gray areas. Okay, so we've got Li,
Yeah.
Yi. There was another one, right?
Ah, yes. Ren. This one's often translated as benevolence, but well, it's a richer concept than that.
Give me the nuance then. What's Ren all about?
It's about recognizing our shared humanity, cultivating empathy, compassion. Ren means understanding that we're all connected.
That what we do impacts others, even in small ways.
Exactly. It's about the human heart, caring for others, genuinely.
You know, it's interesting because sometimes people think of Confucianism as very focused on order, on hierarchy.
Right. The rules, the rituals. But Ren,
But Ren is different.
it's what gives it soul. There's a story that illustrates this perfectly.
Well, I love a good story.
So, picture this. One of Confucius's disciples comes running to him, totally panicked. The stable's on fire.
Oh no, what happened?
That's what anyone would ask, right? But Confucius, his immediate response was anyone hurt?
He didn't even ask about the horses.
Didn't mention them. Human well-being, that was his priority.
Wow. It really puts things in perspective.
It shows you the essence of Ren, people first. And that idea, it's more relevant than ever.
Absolutely. It's so easy to get caught up in material things, our own little bubbles. But at the end of the day,
It's about our shared humanity.
exactly. So how did Confucius think we could cultivate this in ourselves? He was big on education, right?
Huge. He truly believed in the power of learning to transform individuals and, by extension, society.
It's like that quote, the unexamined life is not worth living.
He was all about self-reflection, continuous growth. It wasn't just about acquiring knowledge.
He was about using it to become better.
Precisely, lifelong learning. And here's the radical part. He didn't think it should be just for the elite.
Everyone should have access.
Exactly. No matter your social standing, he even created a curriculum to try to make that happen.
Really? What was it called?
The 6 arts: music, archery, calligraphy, mathematics, chariot driving,
Oh, quite a range.
and ritual. He saw it as developing the whole person.
Not just the mind.
Exactly. The physical, the artistic, the ethical. It was about cultivating virtue and capability.
Wow. So ahead of his time. But those are pretty radical ideas for ancient China. I imagine there was some pushback.
Oh, absolutely. Not everyone was on board with this focus on education and moral development,
Oh, jeez.
especially those in power.
Right, the emperors, the dynasties.
There were other schools of thought, too, that clashed with Confucianism. Legalism, for example. They emphasized law, punishment.
Okay, so very different approach.
Complete opposite. It's that classic debate. Are humans inherently good, or do they need strict rules to keep them in line?
And that debate is still going strong today. Look at our justice system, social programs, even how we raise our kids.
It's a fundamental question about human nature, and it gets to the heart of how we think society should function.
It's amazing how these ancient debates, these different ways of looking at the world, are still so relevant.
It speaks to how fundamental they are, right? Trying to figure out human nature, how to create a good society. Those questions never really go away.
They don't. But it wasn't like Confucianism stayed frozen in time either. It evolved, just like society itself.
Exactly. In fact, that's one of the most interesting things about it. Later on, you see Confucianism incorporating elements from other philosophies, Buddhism, Taoism.
It's like it was never meant to be this rigid thing. It was always adapting.
Exactly. It was about finding the wisdom in different traditions, different ways of thinking. And that adaptability, it's part of why it survived. During the Song Dynasty, you get Neo-Confucianism, which blended Confucian ethics with Buddhist and Taoist ideas. It's fascinating how these different schools of thought,
They're all intertwined.
they are. It wasn't just one thing happening in isolation. It was a whole intellectual ecosystem. And you see those echoes even today.
Especially in modern China.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about a complex relationship.
Yeah.
Because for a while there, the Communist Party was very much anti-Confucius.
It's true. In those early years of the People's Republic,
They saw it as too old-fashioned.
too connected to the old systems, the hierarchies they were trying to dismantle, the inequalities.
Like it was like this symbol of the past they wanted to move away from. So what changed? Why is Confucianism having a resurgence now?
Well, it's a complex story, but part of it is about identity. As China becomes a global power.
They're looking for their place in the world.
Exactly. And part of that is re-examining their own cultural heritage. Confucianism, with its emphasis on things like harmony, ethical leadership, It's having a moment.
Like rediscovering those values, seeing what they might offer in the 21st century.
Yes, and of course it sparked a whole new wave of debate. Some people see it as this valuable guide, a way to navigate the complexities of the modern world.
But others are wary.
Of course, because any philosophy taken too far can be misused, right? There are concerns about authoritarianism, about using those ideas to justify too much control.
So even today, it's not simple. There are no easy answers. Just like those debates between Confucianism and legalism centuries ago.
It's all still playing out. Which brings us back to that question we raised earlier, that mystery about authorship.
Oh, right. Did Confucius even write any of this stuff? It's like the ultimate history mystery. What's the verdict?
Well, there isn't a simple answer, unfortunately. Some scholars think he probably authored or at least edited some of the key texts, like the Analects.
The ones with all those famous sayings?
Exactly. But others think he was more of a synthesizer, taking older wisdom, maybe things that were passed down orally, and giving them new life.
So he might not have invented it all from scratch.
Exactly. Maybe he was more of a curator, a brilliant editor, which, when you think about it, is still a huge contribution. To take those ideas, shape them, make them powerful enough to last for centuries.
That's a legacy in itself.
It is, and it makes you think, doesn't it, about what it means to be an author. Where do ideas really come from?
And how do they spread? It's not always a straight line.
Never. It's more like this fascinating web of influence building on what came before. And that question, that's something we can all ponder. It's bigger than just Confucius.
It makes you look at history differently, that's for sure. Well, on that note, I think we've done our deep dive for today. From those fortune cookie sayings to ancient rebellions to modern-day China.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. Big thanks to our expert for guiding us through it all.
It's been my pleasure.
And to all of you listening, thanks for joining us on this journey. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.